On the Nature of Colonialism by Aimé Césaire. Abridged from Aimé Césaires Discourse on Colonialism and translated by Irving Leonard Markovits. A civilization which appears to be incapable of resolving the problems which disturb its functioning is a decadent civilization. A civilization which chooses to close its eyes to its most crucial problems is a stricken civilization. A civilization which plays tricks with its principles is a moribund civilization. The fact is that so-called European civilization, Western civilization, as 2 centuries of bourgeois regimes have made it, is incapable of resolving the 2 major problems to which its existence has given birth, the proletariat problem and the colonial problem, exempted from the bar of reason as from the law of conscience. This Europe is powerless to justify itself. More and more, she takes refuge in a hypocrisy that becomes more odious as her deception becomes less effective. Europe is indefensible. In itself, militarily, this is not serious. What is serious is that Europe is morally and spiritually indefensible. And today, one finds that it is not only the European masses who raise this accusation, but dozens and dozens of millions of men all over the world who from the depths of slavery have raised themselves up as her judges. They, the colonialists, can kill in Indochina, torture in Madagascar, imprison in Black Africa, perform outrages in the Antilles. From now on, the colonized know that they have an advantage over the colonizers. They know that their temporary masters lie, and that therefore their masters are weak. Since today I must speak about colonization and civilization, let us go directly to the principal lie from which all the others spring. Colonization and civilization? In this matter, the most common failure is to become, by acting in good faith, the dupe of a clever collective hypocrisy, to misrepresent the problem in order to better legitimize the odious solutions which it then proposes. In other words, the most important thing is to see, think, understand, and respond clearly to the initial innocent question: what, in principle, is colonization? Let us be frank about what it is not. It is neither evangelism, nor philanthropic enterprise, nor a determination to push back the frontiers of ignorance, sickness, or tyranny. Nor is it the expansion of God, nor the extension of law. Let us admit, once and for all, without flinching from the consequences, that the decisive characteristics here is that of the adventurer and pirate, of the great spice merchants and ship owners, gold seekers and traders, appetite and force, and behind them, born in the shade, malignant, a form of civilization which at one moment in its history found itself obliged to extend the competition of its economic antagonists to the world level. Continuing this analysis, I find that such hypocrisy is recent, that neither Cortez discovering Mexico from the height of the great Teocalli, nor Pizarro before Cusco, still less Marco Polo before Cambalut, protested that they were the bearers of a superior order. They killed, they pillaged, they brought with them their helmets, spears, and lustful desires. The slavers came later. I place the major responsibility for all this on Christian pedantry for having dishonestly formulated the equation: Christianity equals civilization, paganism equals savagery. From this, there could only follow the abominable colonist and racist consequences whose victims had to be the Indians, yellow-skinned races, and Negroes. Having made this clear, I admit that placing different civilizations in contact with each other is good, that bringing together different worlds is excellent, that a civilization which only looks in upon itself, whatever its particular genius, becomes enervated, that cultural exchanges are the lifeblood of civilization. The great opportunity for Europe was to have served as a crossroad, as the geometric crossroads for all ideas, the cradle of all philosophies, and the place of welcome for all beliefs. Europe has become the best redistributor of energy. But then I must raise the following question. Has colonization really acted as a force for contact? Or, if one prefers to put the question a bit differently, of all the ways of establishing contact, was this the best? I answer, no. And I say that the distance from colonization to civilization is infinite. Out of all the colonial expeditions put together, out of all the colonial statutes drawn up, all the ministerial instructions sent out, it is impossible to find a single human value. It is necessary, first of all, to study how colonization works, to decivilize the colonizer, to brutalize him in the real sense of the word, degrading him and awakening in him buried instincts of lust, violence, racial hatred, moral equivocations. Then, one must show how every time a head is cut off and an eye bashed in Vietnam, and this is accepted in France, a child is violated and this is accepted in France. Someone in Madagascar is executed and it is accepted in France. Something is added to that civilization which hangs heavy with its dead weight. A universal regression is brought about. A gangrene sets in. An infection begins which spreads throughout the system, and at the end of all these violated treaties, at the end of all these lies that are told, the punitive expeditions tolerated, all the prisoners bound and interrogated, all the patriots tortured, at the end of the encouragement of racial arrogance and a steady boastful swaggering, there is the slow but steady brutalization of the continent, and a poison is instilled in the veins of Europe. And then, one fine day, the bourgeois in their turn are awakened by a great shock. The Gestapo has kept busy, the prisons are filled up, and the torturers go about their business, inventing, refining, and chatting about their techniques. People are astonished. They're indignant. They say, how curious this is, but bah, it is like Nazism. It will pass. And they wait, and they hope, and they keep the truth to themselves, which is a barbaric thing to do. But the supreme barbarism, the one which tops them all, the one which sums up all the daily doses of barbarities, yes, it is Nazism, but it is more than Nazism, is that before becoming its victim, they have been its accomplices. They supported this Nazism before submitting to it. They absolved it. They winked at it. They legitimized it. Because before, it had only been applied to non-European peoples. They cultivated this Nazism. They are responsible for it. They are responsible for the fact that it rises up and breaks through all the fissures of Western Christian civilization, drop by drop, before engulfing all in its reddened waters. Yes, It would have been worth the trouble to clinically study in detail the rise of Hitler and Hitlerism, and reveal to the very distinguished, very humanist, very Christian bourgeois of the 20th century that he bore within himself a Hitler that he did not know, to show him that Hitler inhabited him, that Hitler was his demon, that if he vituperated Hitler, it was through a failure of logic, and that at bottom, what he did not forgive in Hitler was not the crime itself, the crime against man. It was not the humiliation of man in itself. It was the crime against the white man. It was the humiliation of the white man. It was having applied to Europe colonialist procedures which until then have only been used on the Arabs of Algeria, coolies of India, and Negroes of Africa. And this is the great reproach that I address to pseudo-humanism. For too long, it has diminished the rights of man. It has had, it still has, a narrow, compartmentalized, unfair, and partial conception of the rights of man. That was, all things taken into account, sordidly racist. I have spoken a good deal about Hitler. His worth is that he permitted us to see and to understand that capitalist society in its present stage is incapable of establishing the rights of peoples because it is admittedly unable to establish any morality for individuals. At the end of formal humanism and philosophic abnegation, there is Hitler. For my part, if I recall several details of those hideous butcheries of colonialism, it is not because of any morose delight. It is because I think that those human heads, those collections of ears, those burned houses, those barbarian invasions, this smoking blood, those towns which disappeared under the hacking of the knife, cannot be gotten rid of so easily. They prove, I repeat, that colonization dehumanizes even the most civilized men. Colonial activity, the colonial enterprise, colonial conquest, founded on scorn for the indigenous peoples and justified by this scorn, inevitably tends to change those who undertook this venture. The colonizer who, in order to maintain a clear conscience, habituates himself to seeing the others as animals, so as to treat them as animals objectively tends to transform himself into an animal. It is this reaction, this shock from the reaction of colonization, that is important to note. But let us speak of the colonized. I see clearly what colonization has destroyed. The admirable Indian civilizations, neither Detterding, nor Royal Dutch, nor Standard Oil, will ever console me for the Aztecs nor the Incas. I see clearly those civilizations condemned to destruction, in which colonization has introduced the beginnings of ruin. Oceania, Nigeria, Nyasaland. I see less clearly what benefits colonialism has brought. Security? Culture? Law? While waiting, I look and see that wherever the colonizers and colonized meet face to face, there is force, brutality, cruelty, sadism, violence, and the hasty manufacture and a parody of cultural training. Several thousand subordinate officials, boys, artisans, commercial employees, and interpreters who are necessary for the proper functioning of the colonial establishment. I have spoken of contact. Between colonizer and colonized, there is only room for forced labor, intimidation, pressure, policing, taxes, theft, rape, forced farming, scorn, distrust, arrogance, roguery, and conceit towards the deranged elites and downtrodden masses. There is no human contact, but only the relationship of domination and submission, which transformed the colonizer into a pawn, a lieutenant, a convict, a guard, a whip, and the colonized into an instrument of production. It is my turn to formulate an equation. Colonization equals thingification. I hear a storm of protest. They speak to me of progress, the accomplishments, sickness conquered, higher standards of living. I speak of societies emptied of themselves, of trampled cultures, undermined institutions, confiscated lands, of assassinated religions, annihilated artistic masterpieces, of extraordinary possibilities suppressed. They throw up to me facts, statistics, the number of kilometers of roads, canals, and railways. I speak of thousands of men sacrificed in the Congo Ocean. I speak of those who at the time I am writing are in the process of digging out the port of Abidjan by hand. I speak of millions of men torn away from their gods, their land, their customs, their way of life, their livelihood, their dance, and their wisdom. I speak of millions of men in whom fear, trembling, feelings of inferiority, despair, toadyism were knowingly inculcated, and who were brought to their knees. They have kept me fully informed about the tonnage of cotton or cocoa exported, the acres of olives or vines planted. I speak of destroyed food crops, the beginnings of undernourishment, of agricultural development directed only toward the benefit of the metropole, of the seizure of produce and primary goods. They boast about suppressed abuses. I also speak of abuses. But in order to say that on top of the old, very real abuses they have superimposed, others that are very detestable, they speak to me of local tyrants who have been straightened out. But I declare that in general, they keep themselves in office very well with the new ones, and that a network of good services and complicity between the old and new tyrants has been established to the detriment of the people. They speak to me of civilization. I speak of proletariatization and mystification. For my part, I would systematically vindicate these para-European civilizations. Every day that passes, every denial of justice, every police bludgeon, every workers' demonstration put down in blood, every scandal hushed up, every punitive expedition, every car of the Secret Service, every policeman, and every soldier impresses us with the value of our old societies. They were communitarian societies, never only for a few. They were not only anti-capitalist societies, as they say, but also anti-capitalist. They were democratic societies, always. They were cooperative societies, fraternal societies. I would systematically vindicate those societies destroyed by imperialism. They were fact. They had no pretense of being idea. They were, in spite of their faults, neither contemptuous nor contemptible. They were content with being. Neither the word failure nor the word avatar made any sense to them. They kept hope intact. Colonial Europe is treacherous in justifying, after the fact, its colonial activities by virtue of the apparent progress realized in some domains. Nobody knows what stage of material development these societies would have reached without European intervention. The technical equipment and administrative reorganization, the Europeanization of Africa and Asia, were in no way necessarily tied, as the example of Japan proves, to the European occupation. The Europeanization of non-European continents could have come about other than under the boot of Europe. This Europeanization movement was already underway before colonization. Afterwards, in fact, it was even slowed down. In any case, this movement was perverted by the occupation of Europe. For evidence, there is the fact that at present it is the inhabitants of Africa and Asia who are demanding schools, and it is colonial Europe who refuses them. It is the African who asks for ports and roads, and it is colonial Europe who haggles. It is the colonized who wants to go forward, and it is the colonizer who keeps him back.